Most people have a bookshelf and nice books. I have dead fucking animals. Every one of these animals, I ate.
Chris LaCivita, the man behind many men and women. Uh, I don't know what to call you anymore. You were the co-campaign manager for now President Donald Trump, now advising in all sorts of ways. But how would you describe your current gig?
I mean, look, I have been for literally 35 years a national political consultant, Republican political consultant, and I've done political campaigns from the lowest of levels to the highest, and I've loved every minute of it.
So listen, you did do a lot of flying around though, as did I over the course of the last, couple of years. What are you seeing from the campaign trail, the strategy that the conversations that you and Susie and President Trump had while you were on the road, now translating to the White House? Is it lining up with what you thought it was going to look like in these first weeks?
Yeah, actually, I don't think that um, the folks in Washington, or the press corps for that matter, were ready for it, although they should have been.
I was ready.
Um, because because they've been covering them for so long. And what I mean by that is just the volume, the speed,
Yeah.
um, and the just it's so much to the average person. But if you just think back to the campaign and the amount of ground that the campaign covered, that the president covered on a daily basis, whether it was in a speech or a press conference, for instance. I mean, I remember the press conference he did in Mar-a-Lago that was over 2 hours long, and and just the sheer volume of issues covered and activities and all these things. To be, I think some people didn't think that, like, how would anybody be able to maintain that degree of volume, or that degree of activity, or that degree of intensity
The
right
stamina.
into the White House. Yeah, and he did. And I mean,
Hmm.
and he maintained it during the transition, and then straight into the. I mean, Donald Trump does more before 8 a.m. than most people do all day.
So how many
So,
of these
you know,
executive orders, there have been dozens and dozens already. How many of them do you recognize as stuff that you guys talked about and planned to roll out in these first 100
yeah,
days?
I haven't read every one of them, but I know there's over 100, and all of the big ones on the bigger issues that he talked about doing. Whether it was on men and women's sports and transgender surgeries, or the border, most importantly, from that standpoint, and some of the issues regarding public safety. Every single thing that he said he was going to do in the executive orders, and then some. I've seen none of this is a surprise to me, including the current conversation that we're having on tariffs, the current conversations that we're having on, and no one really knows how to respond. I do know this, that not, I don't want to get out in front of you, but as it relates to tariffs and the Europeans and the Canadians, I mean, talk about how not to engage with Donald Trump.
What
I
do you
mean,
mean?
well, I mean, part of the reason why we're having this conversation about tariffs and the president is imposing tariffs is because for far too long, the balance has been tipped for the Europeans, the balance has been tipped for the Canadians, the balance has been tipped. I mean, Americans pay more. The governments of Europe subsidize the products, subsidize the companies. So there's this big time trade imbalance that's always existed. And so it's a degree of just basic unfairness that pisses the president off, and quite frankly pisses off a lot of other people. And so and if the president's talking about trying to bring some balance to an imbalance, and then the other side responds with, okay, well, then we're just going to slap a 50% tariff on your whiskey. Trump's like, fuck you. I'm not going to put 200% on, champagne and wine.
No, listen, I think I get your point. The thing that I've been watching though is the stock market, as I know a lot of folks in
Yeah.
business have been watching.
Bunch
Anyone
of
with a
bedwetters.
but folks with the 401k, Chris,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that President Trump and to some extent, others like Secretary Bessent have started to have a more frank conversation with American people saying like, hey, yeah, there might be some disturbance in the short term. Um my question
I
is
mean,
though, like,
you look at the amount of times there were disturbances in the last 4 years.
right.
I mean, that went on for weeks. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not underscoring or lessening the impact. I have the same accounts and the same 401ks that other people have, but
Well, you're
you
doing
know,
better than most average Americans,
oh
I'd say.
please. I mean,
But
I'm wow. It depends on what publication you read because a lot of them print a bunch of BS. But anyway, but no, I mean, I think the Treasury Secretary, when he said there's going to be some short-term volatility, well, there's always going to be short-term volatility. I mean, there's short-term volatility every quarter, every time a jobs report comes out, every time there's an inflation report coming out, which by the way
sure, but
showed
this is a more radical approach to tariffs and to trade than we've seen in a long time. And there are
since the
me
last time he was there. Yeah.
But there are some, I mean, I'd say even more than the last time. And I mean, there are some like smaller and medium-sized businesses that are saying like, hey, we can't respond to these quickly enough to keep our businesses open if we do end up having to pay these tariffs. Like
Right.
how is the White House gonna message and square that?
I mean, look, they have some really solid people that understand the marketplace, that understand, how all of these things work, whether it's, Howard over at Commerce or Scott over at Treasury, um, and Kelly at SBA. I mean, these are not insignificant or stupid people. They understand how the interplay between the markets and business. And look, there are things that have to change. It's the same way, whether it's where it's a recognition that we have to do something overall, um, to create more of a trade balance. I mean, look, I remember in the Wall Street Journal went after the president on the steel tariffs back in his first term, and it actually they were 100% wrong, and the tariffs actually helped the industry. So, but it's the same sort of look. I'm not discounting the fact that there's a lot of shock therapy going on right now. It's very fast. It's a lot. Um, and it's literally a ripping the band-aid off. And
Do you
and
think your average
people like,
American can handle that? Even those that voted for Trump?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, oh, well, yeah. I mean, we're seeing it. I mean, the president's numbers are still holding very, very strong, um, and it's the same thing as it relates to what Doge is doing with regard to government spending. I mean, the stuff they are finding is absurd. Just, I mean, but and a lot of this, by the way, it's not new. A lot of this has been part of the government spending, forever. So I think that we need to be more aggressive in pointing out how bad it really is in terms of, we're paying to study the sex habits of snails, or we're paying to do this, we're paying to do that. That's real stuff. So the average Joe can't understand why we're paying that kind of shelling out that kind of money. Now they're not going to cut Social Security. They're not going to cut Medicare. They're just not. That's just fear
Well, I don't
mongering
know,
from the
but
left.
Musk did say in an interview, I think with Larry
He's
Kudlow
not president.
recently.
He's not president. He doesn't get to make those decisions.
So why is he
He's
saying that? Why is he out there
I
saying
don't
that?
know. I don't speak for him. I mean, he says whatever he says, but the fact of the matter is
Is that kind of
there's
thing
a
a
House,
problem
there's a
for
Senate.
Trump though? Because
I mean,
that
I don't
stuff
spend a lot
freaks
of
people
time.
out,
Yeah,
you know?
well, no, it's what freaks the media out because the media loves a boogeyman. And so the media has decided, oh, well, we've got Donald Trump, but we'll go after Elon. Um, and so that's what they're doing. And so, and my advice has always been, if you get punched, punch back twice as hard. Um, and and um, and it's not like we don't have the ammunition to do that. It's not like we don't have the. There's a lot of proof out there that
Who
shows
are
how
you
bad
punching
things are
back?
with it. Who?
Who are you punching back?
Oh,
Yeah.
just that's a figure of speech. Generally speaking, in the rhetorical jabs that we engage in, the press.
Ouch. Are you surprised though, in the first 100 days, given what I was hearing on the campaign trail, like I really thought that immigration was going to be the top topic, but it has been a lot about Musk and DOGE. Are you surprised like how dominant that conversation and the DOGE of it all has been?
No, and this is right because that is the media strategy, right? Because the border was such a winning issue for the president. I mean, it's put him in a great position because um, open borders became such a open problem across the country, whether it was migrant crime and the billions and billions of dollars they were spending to put them up in hotels, blah blah blah. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And the press decided, okay, well, we'll just eliminate that as an issue. I mean, the president obviously made all of the moves that he said he was going to make on the campaign to end the open borders and to stop the funding and stop moving migrants, illegals into other parts of the country at the taxpayers' dime. So if the press puts a cap on it, then to them it doesn't exist as an issue. So then they refocus all of their firepower on the issue of government spending and
So
Doge.
you think the
And
only
here's
reason
the thing.
government spending is a story is because the media is covering it? But like that's what's happening. There's a lot more, I would say, happening on government spending and tariffs too, by the way, than there is on immigration right now. I mean, where's the mass deportation that the president talked about so much on the
Well, I
show?
mean, there's deportations. Well, first of all, you've been there 50 days, and he's already moved out a lot of bad people. So and that's an ongoing process that'll continue to happen throughout the year. But I think it's interesting that, and you know what, in what people don't realize is from a Republican standpoint, purely political standpoint, I love having a battle and a national debate on the issue of spending and taxes because those are issues that are in the conservative Republican wheelhouse. They are the issue that's the one issue that unifies all Republicans. 90% of Republicans, 95% of Republicans are unified on the issues of taxes and spending. And so when we're engaged in this big battle over government spending, and and the left are defending USAID and some of the bullshit they've been spending and tens of millions of dollars on, billions of dollars on for periods of years versus what it could be spent on. That's a fight we'll take any day of the week. When we get into the battle over taxes, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, reinstituting the 2017 tax cuts, making them permanent. That's a battle that we like because that's our turf.
How hard is Susie's job right now compared to the campaign trail?
It's tough. Look, she's a warrior. She just a warrior and a dear friend. Um, and but she's perfectly up for the task. That's one tough cookie. And you know, I used to joke on the campaign all the time because it's a statement of fact, and anybody that knows me knows it to be true that, when you're dealing with me, you see me coming a mile away. I make a lot of noise. Susie, she'll sneak right up on you. But no, it's a tough, of course, it's one of the toughest jobs in the world. And but she does it with a degree of grace and humility, and she's very determined, and she's very, very good at what she does, and she's very good at keeping people moving in the right direction. Right, even people that may be across that with each other, she has an ability to hold things together, and that's just something that this White House will continue to lean on.
Some chiefs want to put their imprint on a presidency, want to put a policy imprint on an administration. It doesn't seem like that's necessarily Susie's angle. Like,
Mhm.
how do you see the mark that she wants to leave on
Yeah,
this White House?
that's a good question, but people should know that that's not the job of a chief of staff. The job of a chief of staff, the impact or the imprint or their legacy should be the legacy of anonymity, should be the legacy of the effectiveness of their principle. and the ability of their principal to accomplish X, Y, and Z, the effectiveness of the operation in support of, and just like on a campaign, in the campaign that Susie and I had the pleasure of working together on, it wasn't never about us. It's always about the candidate, and and which is part of the reason why it worked so well. So there's a clear understanding here of roles, and she has that understanding. I mean, her role is not to be the person providing all of the policy, ideas, et cetera. Her job is to put the right people around the boss so that the boss can effectuate the kind of policies that he got elected on. Make
How
sense?
different is her job in the White House compared to what her job was like on the trail?
I mean, it's different in the sense that, I mean, she's getting daily security briefings, right?
Right, right.
I mean, it's different
In that way,
in
but
the
is the
basics.
mandate actually the same,
Well,
or
I
how
mean, the
does it
mandate I
change?
think is somewhat similar in the sense of making sure that that the all the different aspects of the operation are rowing in the same, right? That all the oars are rowing in the same direction. That's most importantly, they're lining up behind the president. So it's probably it's I think it's twice as big as the campaign, because the campaign was, it was a couple hundred people, but primarily we had to deal with 30 or 40 in the campaign headquarters in Palm Beach and keep things, focused there. And then now you're talking about cabinet secretaries with their own operations and their own staffs and
And
big time
Elon Musk.
agencies and well and Doge and all these other aspects. She's got two very competent and capable and loyal deputies in Taylor Budowich and James Blair, who both came from the campaign, very, very good at what they do. They have large portfolios, so they help manage. And she has a really good White House operation, a really good West Wing operation that is focused on one thing, and that's President Trump being successful. It's not focused on what their portfolio or what talk show host they're going to be when they get out.
On the trail, one of the communications from you and Susie was often, and from Trump himself, was disavowing Project 2025. It was written about a lot. It was
Yeah,
talked about a lot. And you guys
yeah,
kept saying, no, 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 this is not a thing.
yeah.
Look, like now there are a ton of folks who worked on Project 2025, a bunch of heritage people in the administration and some language from, that 900-page manifesto
Right.
that's been making its way in. Was the distancing of Project 2025 just a messaging thing on the trail? Like, is this a
No,
2025 Project
no. I
2025
mean,
administration?
because look, here's the thing about Project 2025, and this wasn't a debate that we were willing to have in a campaign, because in a campaign, if you're explaining, you're losing, right? And but people don't realize that in Project 2025, there are things like, we believe in lower taxes. We believe in reducing the size and scope of government. We believe in boom, boom. I mean, like a ton of stuff in Project 2025 is your standard Republican fare, right? Standard conservative stuff. But there was some stuff in there that we're like, where the hell did that come from? I remember when the New York Times published a story one day, and the president was reading it on the airplane. And he was like, where the hell did this come from? And the story was Trump to if Trump is elected president, he will reinstitute nuclear testing. Okay. And he's like, where the fuck did that come from? Did we do No, we never put a statement out on this. Somebody in Project 2025 wrote a paper that said that this is what, this was a policy. Well, it's just complete made up. I mean, they can write whatever they want, but that just because you have some of the people that worked for it doesn't mean that we're going to institute nuclear, a ban on, or that we would reinstitute testing nuclear weapons. I mean, it's the same thing with taxes. I mean, but in a campaign standpoint and in a discussion, that is the discussion the left and the press wanted us to have. But we weren't. We're not going to give them that. We constantly battled because they wanted to paint. They wanted us to take the bait and go down that rabbit hole and have that discussion. And I'm, I don't have to play by the rules that they try to set, basically.
Is there anything in these first, what, it's been 7 weeks, however many weeks it's been, it feels like a long time already, given everything that's happened. Is there anything that has surprised you in these first few weeks of the administration?
The left's inability to coalesce behind a single message in opposition. I guess that shouldn't surprise me because I couldn't do it on the campaign. For a party that essentially has, for the last 12 years, last 8 years, built itself around one thing, which was hating Donald Trump. I'm just surprised that their inability at this point to uh, you know fight really effectively. I mean, they're all over the map. They have any number of idiots out there, trying to TikTok or whatever it is the hell that they do to get attention. I find it quite amusing, but yeah, I guess that.
Do you worry at all that the economic turmoil might give Democrats the opening they need?
Well, the economic turmoil is as decided by, I mean, built on the market. I remember when there was economic turmoil during the Biden years, and people would say, "Oh, that's not economic turmoil. That's just the market being the market."
Sure, but then
Um,
Biden and Harris lost the election, so you know.
well, they lost the election because of inflation. They didn't lose the election because of the market, the
Right, but
stock
if
market.
there's a
They lost
recession,
it
which
because
Trump
this
has
continued.
acknowledged, is a possibility,
I don't.
whoever's in that
I
seat is
mean,
going to get the blame.
well, oh yeah, and there's plenty of time between now and the midterms, and it's all speculation at this point. It's speculation that is based and built around a negative to carry a particular narrative that I don't necessarily adhere to. So,
Trump does watch the stock market. He certainly watches his approval ratings and the headlines. Like, how strong a stomach does he have for that if there are those bumps in the turmoil in the short term? Like, how strong is his stomach to like hold to these policies?
well, I mean, all you have to do is just look at the strength of his stomach for all the bullshit he had to put up with in the course of his campaign, where they tried to keep him off the ballot. They tried to put him in jail. And then he survived two assassination attempts. Anybody that has the kind of stomach to endure that, wake up every single day, put on that suit and that tie, and stand up in front of a crowd of 10,000 people and motivate the shit out of them, should not underestimate his ability to put up with a couple ups and downs in the stock market.
Do you think that our allies globally are gonna get the message of like how Trump works? Because, you said at the outset they're not
Man, they're
figuring out how to
stupid.
deal with him. But like, is there is
Europeans,
there is
man.
there is there danger in that though? When there is so much uncertainty and it's the on again, off again with the tariffs, or is that like is the fact that nobody knows what he's going to do here the point?
The United States has essentially, since the end of World War II. I mean, I don't need to give people a history lesson, or probably maybe I do,
You're
because
sitting in a room
people,
that makes you
because
very professorial right now, so
well, I don't know about that. Not in this day and age. That is for damn sure. I could switch and show you my bookcase. Maybe that
professor
would
of
work. But
anatomy, maybe.
professor, yeah, no, professor of taxidermy. But so is that as it relates to the Europeans? I mean, we've basically subsidized Europe for the last 50 years, 60 years, post World War II, and they were able to and of course we did the rebuilding and we've done all these things, and they were able to create these these social paradises where the government paid for everything because they didn't have to pay for their national defense. And at some point in time, that gravy train's got to end. Well, the gravy train's ending now, and it's the Cold War's over. The balance of power and the shifts, all those things have changed. The Europeans don't want to change. The politicians in Europe don't want to change, and they sure don't want to change at, I think, at the pace that it's being forced on them to change. They're how they go about spending. So that's going to create a level of angst, if you will. But at the same time, they're arrogant as hell. They're arrogant. I've spent time in Europe in the last couple of weeks, and they still don't get it. They don't understand that. Yeah, there's a new sheriff in town, and He has very, very set ways of and opinions about how we're going to actually put America first. And America first means that it means we're first, you're second.
I
And
mean, yeah,
that's
how do you translate that the America First policy to some of the other moves he's making, like getting quite involved all over the world, potentially, turning the Gaza Strip into the Middle East Riviera. How do you square the
well, that's
entanglements with the
yeah.
America First?
Well, I mean, look, the United States, the Trump administration weren't the ones who tried to build a pier in over in Gaza, and that ended up almost, I think, killing a couple Americans, and it was a disgrace. It was another abomination from the Biden administration. When the president brought that up, President Trump brought that up, it's now forced a discussion about who's actually going to redevelop the Gaza Strip. So I thought it was brilliant because now they're talking
You
about
don't think
who's
he
going
actually
to do
wants
that.
to build
Oh,
a
I
Riviera
think
of the
he
Middle
wants to make
East?
it clear that I think he wants to make it clear that if you don't do it, we will. And sometimes the best motivation for people is a swift kick in the ass. But I also think that from a standpoint of trying to extract it, or at least put an end to the war in Ukraine, from the standpoint of just the sheer volume of killing and destruction that's going on, is, I mean, when was that ever a bad thing?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, translate Trump for us there too, because it seems like he's been a whole lot harder on Ukraine, at least
mm.
publicly, than he has on Russia, and now it's Russia that's, refusing the ceasefire. So, can you translate like why is he, online and in public, like calling Zelensky a dictator and being quite harsh on Ukraine and being
Well, because
a
they weren't
little
willing to.
kinder to
Yeah, they
Russia?
weren't. Well, I mean, look, I mean, look at the way the Zelensky, who's been the entire, their entire defense has been funded primarily by United States taxpayers, and the way he behaved in the White House. I mean, that's just not, that's not, it's not what you do. And they knew that. They knew better, and that got corrected. And so, you know, now we're literally having a conversation that the Russians are the ones who aren't. So now they're going to feel the end of it. Clearly, what a lot of people in the press aren't used to is seeing these kinds of things play out in front of them. Usually it happens behind the scenes. And, you know, as the Washington Post loves to remind readers, democracy dies in darkness, despite the fact that they participated in the largest cover up in, governmental history by covering up the you know Joe Biden's ineptitude and incapability to function. But so you're seeing a lot of things transparently happen on the world stage. But Donald Trump is not hard to figure out. It's he says what he means and he does what he says. So I know some people have a hard time coming to grips with that. But ending a war, ending the war in Europe, wanting to create a degree of stability in the Middle East. Let's not forget they did do the Abraham Accords, which I got no credit for doing. There's some proof in their pudding in terms of what they can actually accomplish. The releasing of all these hostages that we've been able to get, whether they're from Russia, Middle East, or or Venezuela. So there's a lot of activity and it's a lot of stuff going on that's actually having, I think a solid impact. But that's not engaging us in more entanglements. That's about getting results for basic things that we need to get done. The same thing with the Panama Canal. That was new, but that's clearly something that has bothered the president immensely, and
So
bothered
Panama
American
Canal,
policymakers.
Greenland,
Greenland,
Canada
yeah.
being the 51st state, like how seriously, how literally, I guess we can take him seriously, but how literally should we take him on those?
Well, I mean, look, I think that the Canadians have just stepped in a bucket of. I mean, they are so dependent on the United States for everything. So to want to engage in a rhetorical war, it's just they're just not going to win. Um, they're just not going to win, and and it's just I think it's really short-sighted on their part. But I think people also should also realize that there's an election in Canada right now that's coming up in November. I think it's November. And so politics is really fueling this. in Canada, because right after the election is over, no matter who's in charge, they're going to be like, "Oh shit, what did we just do?" Because the impacts of what they're doing here now are going to extend and last a hell of a lot longer than 6 months. But look, the president made it very clear, and if people would take 5 minutes and read the executive order, actually take 10 because it takes 10, to read the executive order on the initial discussion on the 25% tariffs in Canada and Mexico. And the one thing that they would see that is universally throughout that point is a discussion on fentanyl. People don't realize this, but that's driving the discussion is the not only, with the Chinese who produce the precursors for fentanyl and they ship it because, part of their goal is to
Yeah,
weaken the interior of the United
I think the
States.
confusion there from folks is, the disparity between Canada and Mexico on fentanyl. I mean, Canada, it's like what, 40 pounds a year or something, whereas it's thousands coming across the Mexican border. I
Well,
think
let's
that's
put it
where
this way.
the sticking point is.
The Canadians have imported enough fentanyl in the last year to kill every single person that resides in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Syracuse. Now, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people. The Mexicans have imported enough, have smuggled enough, their cartels have smuggled enough to kill every single American 3 times. 450,000 people died from fentanyl. That's more than World War II. Imagine
Yeah,
if
no doubt it's one of the biggest
so
crises plaguing
well,
our
yeah, yeah,
country.
yeah.
Yeah.
And but my point is that the president does not feel that they've done enough to stem the importation, and he's sick of it. So he's like, "Look, if you don't do enough on this,
Yeah.
then this is what you're gonna have to deal with." It's not what people want to hear, but if they read the executive order, then they know, oh, that's what it is.
All right, last question for you.
By the way,
2028, Bannon
oh,
versus Vance.
Bannon.
Who do you vote for?
Wait, who?
Steve
Bannon.
Bannon. He might be running.
Oh, please, come on. No, no.
No, I mean,
JD Vance is the man,
is
and
Vance, I mean, is he carrying on the MAGA mantle like right now? If
I
there was
think he is,
somebody,
and I think he's doing a great job. I mean, first of all, I think that, and I know that the vice president doesn't like the attention or the discussion about that. I mean, my God,
it's a
50
little
days is
early, but we pesky
what's a little
reporters.
early, and people, well, no, I mean, the shit stirrers are always trying to stir. JD is just fundamentally not only a good person, a brilliant person. I think he's more than capable of carrying on the MAGA mantle, and you know, but it's still a long ways away.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. Thanks
You're
for hanging
welcome.
out with this shit stir. I appreciate you and would love to have you back on.
Okay, take care.
All right, take
Thanks.
care.
Appreciate
Bye.
it.